Kerwin, thank you for joining me here today. I've been excited for this conversation. You are one of the few people I have found online who's, how shall we say, this sort of look. This is the problem. Get it done, or you're going to be miserable. That energy that you bring, but it's so hopeful.
Yeah.
It matches mine. You're one of the few creators I have found that I felt like an instant kinship just watching your videos and hearing your voice. So thank you
Thanks,
so
Adam.
much for joining me here.
Mate, great to be here. Appreciate being on.
Absolutely. For everybody who's listening at home, everybody, hi. Would you just share a little bit about yourself so they have a little bit of context? And then I'm going to dive in because I got some deep questions for you.
Oh, that's a big one. Who am I? My name is Kerwin Ray. I am a father to my son Noah, and I've been an entrepreneur now for the last 25 years. I came into entrepreneurship in a range of different ways in a range of different businesses, being involved in acquiring, building, and exiting some small businesses before then finding a path to consulting and really finding, I guess you could say, joy in the space of teaching. And, throughout that journey, I've grown, I'd now say probably, in excess of 1,000 businesses, if not, hundreds very successfully through the work that I do and the clients that I work with. But also I've had a very unusual path. I've had now, I think it would be, and I don't want to make this any kind of statement of brag, but it's probably been about 8 or 9 near-death experiences, fairly significant ones, 2 strokes, 2 PEs, and a range of other scenarios from stabbings to near drownings. So yeah, I've had a very big, very interesting life, and in the process, I've learned a lot about business. I've learned a lot about people. I've learned a lot about performance. I've learned a lot about learned something about relationships. I certainly have, a huge way to go in that space. And I've learned a lot, especially in the last 2 years, about the difference between psychological performance and embodied emotional performance. It's been a big distinction for me in the last 2 years. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. But I think I would like to think there is so much more to me that I'm still yet to uncover.
I love this so much. One major reason I wanted you on here is a lot of the people out in my audience, either they are a small business owner, they've just launched something, or many of them dream of that for themselves. And I think that's fantastic. Small business, as you know, is the backbone of any functioning economy. So if you
Sure
want to
is.
experience the joy and horror of freedom, then you
The
should
joy and
start your
horror
own
of freedom,
business.
indeed. Yeah.
One thing that holds people back a lot is their emotional limitations, their relationship limitations, their attachment issues. This holds people back in their professional life and business ownership, or even just if they're working for a company or something like that. Professionally, this holds you back. And
Yes.
one thing that really struck me in one of your recent Instagram reels, it was just phenomenal. It was you speaking to a group of people, as you do, and sharing with them, look, when you're a kid, right, you learn not to feel your bad feelings. You learn to confuse your system and immediately feel good feelings. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
more about that from you.
Yeah.
What do you see happening in childhood where people are learning not to feel those negative feelings? Why are they running from those?
I think there's 2 conversations there, and I think we'll stick with the first one. There's the I guess you'd call the psychological and the neuro emotional conversation, which is really related to behavioral. But then there's also a new conversation that I've only really come across in the last 2 years, which is really looking at the the cellular biological process, and essentially how our cells and our tissues can become clogged with unfelt sensations and unfelt emotions. So I think my take on this from my own experience and maybe from the observations of others is children. Are you a father, Adam? Yet?
I am a five kids.
Holy you're a breeder. Okay, so one of the
Yes.
things I've discovered in my own journey is children have this way of making us feel really uncomfortable. And it's not that they necessarily do that deliberately, although some parents maybe assume that the kids do. Um, and oftentimes, one of the things I've experienced is the way that my son might make me feel uncomfortable is through the experience of an emotion. And you know, I have had situations and circumstances where my son will have an emotion, and that'll make me feel uncomfortable, and his emotion will make me feel uncomfortable. And I've seen this in other parents probably more prolifically. I feel very grateful that I was over the age of 39 when I had my son, so I've done some work. But I've seen this in my own life in my early childhood where I'd have an experience, or you see a child have an experience that makes the parent deeply uncomfortable, it brings up all sorts of uncomfortable feelings of, it could be anger, could be shame, whatever it is related to that emotion. And so oftentimes what the parent will do is they'll suppress the emotion in the child, and they'll give the child reasons not to feel, or they'll tell the child, don't feel that way. Don't be sad. Don't cry. Don't be angry. Um, and I think sometimes, as parents, it's difficult to separate the expression from the sensation. And so, I think, there's a real deep importance in supporting children to learn how to feel emotions, but not necessarily learn how to express them in unhealthy ways. And I think what happens is, as we develop, as we grow, and I don't know if you've read the book it's a great book. I haven't read it in probably about 3 decades, 2 decades maybe, by James Oliver. It's a parenting book, and it's called They Fuck You Up. Um, and most people don't realize the damage that style of parenting does until midlife, because it's not usually until midlife where, things start to really come to bear. They start, that whatever you've had, in the deep dark patches of your shadow or your psychology, that's the time of life in most cases where it'll go peekaboo and come out. And so that's where, people will discover, oh man, I seem to have this issue when it comes to, feeling an emotion or showing an emotion or expressing emotion, whatever language is used. And I think there's some distinctions there that we can explore. And so we build these patterns where we become, habitually conditioned and trained that when we feel a bad emotion, that it's wrong, um, and that we should focus on feeling emotions that make people feel comfortable, and we shouldn't, express, feel, or experience emotions that make other people feel uncomfortable, because that in itself is wrong. We want the happy face for mum.
And that we ourselves have to run screaming if we feel a bad feeling too.
Yeah, or feel shame or feel guilt, because some people feel, guilty for their anger or guilty for their sadness. I've had experiences in my own life, especially the last few years, as I've, moved more into an embodiment space versus just a psychological performance space. That there are certain emotions that I feel a level of guilt for feeling, and even shame. And I think, having these conversations and bringing these topics forward, I think it's really important, because then when you start looking at the biological or the biochemical process of an emotion, that's when you start to realize that emotions have a cycle. That's why there's a great quote that says, "This too shall pass." If you get to the nitty gritty of it, an emotion is a peptide, so it is a protein. It is released from the hypothalamus, based on a particular type of stimulus. And so, much like any protein, when it, that peptide, it has a particular shape, and when it, bounces around looking for a home in a cell, it'll lock in, and then that cell will metabolize it. But much like if we have an excess of any form of metabolite, in most cases, if the cells are overloaded, they will go into a function where they've got too much information to metabolize, and so they'll store it. And so that's where we get, in some cases, blockages in cells, which become blockages in tissues, which become blockages in organs, as a result of, in some cases, suppressed or a lot of unfelt emotions potentially.
It takes quite a lot to dislodge that and reprogram that. That's the biggest frustration that a lot of my coaching clients have when they come in is they say, Adam, I don't think I'm going to be able to fix this for years and years and years. Their attachment issues, their insecurities, their worries. And what they're thinking is, I'm not going to be able to fix the feelings, so nothing will ever improve. And I tell them, look, you could probably improve 80% of your attachment behaviors and experiences, 80% in a month if you really buckle down and just deal with it. And they're astounded at the idea. And I tell them, look, your nervous system will still feel things. You will still feel things. But the way you choose to respond to these events, the way you choose to fix your behaviors, if you can sit in the discomfort long enough to just have the experience, you can reprogram most of your behavioral patterns and change those relationships very, very quickly. It's just being able to sit in the misery for a little bit and still have the experience you need to have, and then reprogram yourself over time. I love this talk, and just so you know, my audience, I have probably the best science-minded audience here on YouTube, because they're all
Beautiful.
focused in on hormones, neurotransmitters, all of that, the way that impacts our relationships, and that's drawn from. So you're speaking my language, and I know you're speaking their language.
Beautiful.
What does this look like when you step in and you do consulting with a business owner or someone who's working in that industry? When they are struggling with that fear, that expression from childhood, that I'm not allowed to feel bad things, I have to make everybody feel comfortable. How does that hold them back in their business?
Look, I think business is a reflection of, any other area of life. It's just one that often gets a lot more attention because the potential for social recognition is very high. Oftentimes, I heard this quote the other day: people with money get more love. Um, and well, it was actually someone was quoting in America, like when you have money in America, you get love. People love you. And so there is this desire for people to, in most cases, want to become entrepreneurs because they see that as a pathway to becoming loved. In most cases through either money or through recognition or in some ways through fame. Entrepreneurship has become very much a celebrity game of sorts in some respects for some people. And so I think, when you look at, how people relate to others, it in most cases will be a reflection of how they relate to themselves. And that will, in most cases, really become apparent in the way that they relate to others, especially when it comes to team members. And, if you choose to take the path of becoming an entrepreneur and growing businesses, you're going to go from having one intimate relationship to potentially 20 intimate relationships, depending on the number of people and how close in terms of proximity you work with those individuals. And so, you know, as a belief before really getting in and answering that question, I think a lot of people unconsciously seek out business because they're looking for a way to fix themselves, because they feel like something is wrong. They feel like maybe something is wrong with the world, something is wrong with themselves. And so they gravitate towards a vehicle of personal development. And some people, they play maybe in a corporate or in a job space and they just do, the stereotypical personal development, but others really, grab it by the short and curly, so to speak, and they really dive into an environment where you're really forced to grow. You're really forced to confront some big things. And some people, will double down and they'll really defend their dysfunction and they'll drive through dysfunction because, I know from my own experience, dysfunctional behaviors can be really effective in some respects, especially if you've got a level of perseverance, if you've got a level of aggression, if you've got a level of, the ability to. Steve Jobs was, famous for his reality distortion field. Psychologists would call that narcissism. you know, because he sees the world differently to others, and he will force that reality onto others. And so some of those toxic behaviors can get rewarded, which is really quite dangerous. And we see this, whether you're looking at anyone who's got high visibility, who's controversial, you'll often see some of the things that makes them interesting is watching the dysfunction. And so I think, and if I'm getting back to your question, how much does it get in the way? I think it gets in the way a lot, but it depends on what you're looking for in terms of how you define getting in the way. Because for some people, they can use their dysfunction to drive. And for others, their path is different. They'll use that dysfunction as a feedback mechanism to, to better themselves and to become better and become better humans. And I think that, for me, I can relate to this in my own journey. I think I started business because I grew up in an environment where felt like the absence of money. And, there was a maternal figure in my life who put a lot of value on men with money. And so as a result, I became programmed to, well, if I'm going to have any value, I need to, get some money. And so with that, I think that's, it can be dangerous because if we look at business as purely a vehicle for making money, then that will be the focus. And Dan Pink, I don't know if you like his work or familiar with his work, Carol Dweck, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, like I love their work in terms of how they look at, drivers and motivations. Dan Pink, in his book Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Really Motivates Us, he talks about research in there where they discovered people who focus on money as a driver, I think it was about 7 times more likely to commit, deceit, deception, or fraudulent related behaviors, 8 times more likely to experience stress-related disorders.
Is it okay if I poke and prod a little bit and ask you a couple questions just for the
Yeah,
people at
sure.
home
Yeah, of course.
who are hearing this? Okay, they're going to resonate with you pretty hard as you're going through this challenge. And you've climbed that mountain. You've climbed that first mountain. You're looking down. And you say, "Okay, is there nothing else?" And you look up and you see the big second mountain ahead of you, and you say, "How the heck am I going to tackle that thing? And am I going to die trying?" A lot of guys look up and they say, "I'm probably going to die halfway up that mountain." You mentioned, for example, that you have a son. That was the first thing when I said, "Who are you?" You said, "I am a father to my son Noah," and that was the way you introduced yourself. That was
Yeah.
beautiful. What what role has having somebody to love played in the last several, whatever your period of time is that you're doing this new growth into who you
Yeah.
are? What role has that love played in that so far?
Well, first of all, I have another son, Jonah, which I feel terrible that I didn't mention, but I don't get to see him as much, so I don't share as as deeper depth of connection with him. But Noah, I've been there since day dot, and I think he's really taught me how to love. Um, it's interesting hearing you share that science because I'm not familiar with all that science, and I find that absolutely intriguing. And so I don't think I learnt to bond very well with others as a child. And I can only assume, and this is an assumption, that maybe there was a situation and circumstances where it didn't feel safe to bond with others. Um, and so learning how to bond with my son has been a phenomenal experience. And, I think that's where it gives us the opportunity to, as lone wolves, it gives people the opportunity to cut through because they are so innocent, they are so pure, especially as small children. They're not coming into our lives with so much of a personality that can make us feel threatened. And that's dangerous because, we can overrun their personality and really try and shape and control their personality. But it creates a very safe space, because you don't feel judged as your child is growing. You don't feel, um, in most cases, until they maybe can start talking back and telling you things, they make you feel ashamed of who you are. They're very loving. They give you this unconditional love, and it's just a beautiful experience. And so, yeah, I think it's really shaped me a lot. I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to be a father. I really look forward to building, a strong relationship with my other son, Jonah, when the time comes to be able to do that at a deeper level. But my son now, Noah, he's turned 10, he's turning 11 next January. And yeah, just he really just provides a level of love, unconditional, and yeah, it's like having your own, I guess you could say, personal fan club that follows you everywhere, and that feels amazing. But he's now entering that phase where learning how to critique me. He is learning how to push back. He has got some hormones coming through, and so this is I'm going through my own new phase with him right now in terms of okay, how do we love with difference? Because that's as a a lone wolf avoidant, and I'd like to think definitely an ethical avoidant. My challenge has always been, how do you love with difference? And so, a big part of my life has been learning how to accept difference in others, but also seeking out people who can accept difference in me. Um, which is also, because I think it's one thing to learn how to accept different realities and differences in others, which in itself is a practice. But then it's another thing to be able to attract a mate who has those same qualities, and can differentiate their experience, and have their own experience, but also, and this is the thing, how do you have your own experience, but be accepting that someone is having the same experience, but it's very different, but they're sitting in the same room as you. That in itself
I can
is,
an- I, I can answer this, and then I have a very important question for you that'll draw from it. So one thing you're talking about is that oxytocin bonding, feel that warmth and that
mm,
connection. But there's an even deeper connection that we men in particular really fixate on, something called vasopressin. Now, vasopressin is the hormone released when you work with another human being to resolve cortisol and stress together. Then it unleashes the vasopressin to say that person is a trusted ally. They helped me. So
mm,
20,000 years ago, if you and I are hunting mammoths together, even if we don't like each other, and you pull me out of the way and we kill the mammoth together, and you save my life, my brain says, that man, he's an ally. Keep him around. And then it initiates a deeper desire for bonding with you later.
mm,
But that vasopressin, we have more receptors as men even than women do in particular for that goal setting. So fathers need to initiate their sons into masculine vasopressin bonding. And then that is supposed to carry forward into business, where really, as you're helping people fix businesses, you probably are, they're vasopressin bonding to you. Maybe you are
mm.
with them. Can you tell me, now that you're hearing about some of that, where do you find yourself maybe bonding with your son with that? How are you maybe initiating him into solving challenges together? And then how important do you think that is in the business realm? You've seen it there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen the same patterns play out in my parenting as it has in business. And I'm very much someone who loves to be of service. I love to help. I love to, if I've got something that can help you, I mean, I want to tell you about it. And good luck shutting me up. And that as a parent can be really challenging because there is a time required where as parents we have to step back and allow our kids to start solving problems. And as entrepreneurial parents, as an entrepreneurial parent, sometimes we have this value on time whereby time is so scarce and so limited, which in some respects it is. But when we're parenting, fast is slow, and this to me, I'm telling this to me as much as I'm sharing this with you, because we know we can solve the problem really quickly and we can keep moving, but there's no value for the child or for Noah when I do that. And so, I'm finding myself now, in this phase of life that I'm in to just slow down as much as possible. Really trying, and he's about to enter that phase now, where he's about to go into his teenage years. And so now I'm literally thinking, how do I, because I'm not happy with the amount of work that I do right now. I'm really honest with you. I'm not enjoying the amount of work that I'm doing right now. And for me, I am really asking some big questions, right? Am I willing to work that hard for those rewards and sacrifice that relationship? And the answer is very challenging because, when you start, looking at less time, moving away, whatever, there's that identity piece, right? Which is so fixed to that entity, that business, who you are, what you feel defines you in so many ways. But I know if I don't start investing more quality time with him, this is a period where I really need to, be around to support him solving those problems and be more effective at allowing him to solve those problems. And, I could sit here and say I do a great job of it, but I think I do a reasonable job and I could do a lot better. And I see that with my clients as well. Like the clients that I help the most, in most cases, are the ones that will struggle more. I've got this organization, K2 Elite, that I've spent over a decade building, and we've generated in excess of $1 billion for our clients in the last 10 years. It's been very successful, and but one of the things that I've always tried to do is innovate to the point of what you would try and say, well, I'm trying to innovate to the point of disruption. But what I realize is the more things I put in place to help the clients outside of just the basics of the frameworks, the less chance they have of actually achieving success because they're not learning how to critically think. They're not learning how to solve their problems. They're not learning how to, become their own boss, because that's what an entrepreneur really is someone who has mastered the art of solving problems in a particular industry, inside and outside.
One of the saddest truths about being a father, and I say this because we're both dads, is so many dads out there don't get to be part of their family because they're so
Mm,
busy providing for their family. And even after a certain threshold is covered and your family is at least safe and fed, that drive doesn't end. You just keep providing, you keep providing, you keep pulling the plow because you don't really know anything different. It sounds like you're
mm.
stepping forward as a father and you're learning different so that you can hand down
Yeah,
different to your
I'm at the
kids.
stage where I'm asking some bigger questions. I'm asking some much bigger questions, and I think it's, Jonah's 2, Noah's 10. I'd like to have more time to be able to, spend with Jonah. I'd like to have more time to be able to spend with Noah. And in order for me to do that, something has got to give. And so, yeah, but like many people, when you get to that point where you have such an identity invested in a thing that's, at the end of the day, let's be really honest, it's just a business, and what is, but, I'm, I can say that and I can laugh, but the reality is I'm experiencing the pain and the egoic death after death after death of trying to peel myself away from that reality of going, what if I walked away tomorrow? Like, what would that look like? Like, what would that look like if I just walk away tomorrow and just trust, focus on my family, focus on feeling and just following feelings versus following money and trying to keep everyone else happy and keep everyone else safe? What if I just put the attention on me and my family? What would that be like? And that's a pretty big, threatening to the ego question when there's a lot invested in that identity.
What if you did that for 1 year? What would happen if you did it for 1 year, do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I'm curious. I'm definitely curious because I think when we, and this has been a part of my journey the last 2 years, the embodiment journey versus the psychological journey, because those to me are very different phases of life or phases of performance. I think when we become, again, this is all assumption, but I feel when we become more embodied, that opens us up to living a life of greater levels of joy because we are following the feeling, and this is going to be really threatening to some people, especially men. I'm not going to follow my feelings. My feelings are so unreliable. While in a lot of cases, our emotions can make us very unreliable, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that our intuition is pretty bang on. But most of us have lost touch with it, and so yeah, I think the potential to live a greater life by following feelings versus following logic is a big challenge for a lot of people to even consider, let alone practice. I've got this one mate. He's a mate, but he also coaches me as well. His name's Jamie, and he's in his mid-40s, not married, no kids, but he's like literally one of the happiest people I know in my entire crew. Always laughing, always smiling, hundreds of friends, like literally everybody knows him, everybody loves him. And all he does is just follow the feeling of what feels good. Does this feel good? All right, I'll go do that. And, he gets to the point where, sometimes he's about to run out of money, but he goes, I trust, I'll just follow the feeling. And then sure enough, he trips over a fucking barrel of money somewhere and, he keeps going. It's just hilarious. But, yeah, it's interesting. It's something that I'm contemplating right now, but I'm certainly not there, but it's bringing up a lot of stuff. Yeah, a lot of fear.
Fear, man. And it kind of circles back to the beginning of our conversation about how so many of us are trained not to go into those heart feelings, not to go into the fear, not to go into the sadness, not to experience it, to run away from it. You said something in one of your Instagram reels that was brilliant, which was talking about, our parents teach us, don't feel bad, feel good instead. And the cell says, well, I'm not even done feeling bad yet. Well, and you
Yeah,
just
I'm still
cram
I'm
the
still
good
eating the
feelings in
food.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still eating the food. And you cram the good feelings down the gullet, or you turn it off. You turn off the bad feelings. You just say, nope, we're going over there. We're pretending you don't exist. And there you are right there sitting with it. Something that I heard is to be a father and a business owner at the same time means you are always disappointing someone somewhere.
Mm,
And it's just, you have to get used to that feeling. And it's so true. I've had to, myself included, as father of five and running my own business, building it. I'm in year 3 right now, if that helps you understand where we're at. And it's you are always disappointing someone somewhere,
yeah.
and usually that person is you. It's
Yeah.
usually you.
Most of the time.
It's taking care of other people, though, to the extent that they need you to.
Have you heard of the law of lesser pisses?
No, please tell me.
So a mate of mine, John D. Martini, shared this with me quite some time ago. He said, if you have to choose between pissing someone else off and pissing yourself off, always choose someone else because you don't have to live with them.
That's
Sounds
very
great
good
in theory.
advice. It sounds great in theory. It's really good for avoidantly attached people because that works
Yeah.
out great for them. Anxiously attached people would say, "I'd rather get run over by a bus and let them
Yeah.
watch." So it makes sense. No, one benefit that I found is we can't do it all alone, and when we try to calibrate our relationships on our own, we disappoint everybody, it seems like.
Mm,
So one thing that I try to encourage
yeah, been
is
there.
being communicative about experiences and communicative about expectations with other people for what they want from us, what they expect out of us. You probably train people in this in business. How important is it to talk with other people about their clear expectations so that we even know what the real expectations are?
Look, I think it's really important. It's like in a job interview, right? In business, everyone's got to have a description of work, which really contextualizes the expectations. But that's a two-way street because in order for someone to perform their role, there's a certain set of needs that have to be met. There might be technological needs, there might be environmental needs, there might be reporting needs. And so I think the greater levels of clarity that we have on our expectations and our needs, but more importantly, I think when you combine that with the language of how people feel, and again, heard, seen, um, is big. I think one of the things I've found really interesting is getting team members to do love languages so that you understand how they feel loved. Because I think a big part of that is because you could be really clear with all the expectations in the world, really clear with what your needs are. But if you're not showing your reward, if you're not rewarding them in a way that is consistent with what triggers their love signal, then, as you could do it all day long. I've been in so many situations, I've been in a number of situations before where I just feel like no matter what I do, the person can't see how much I love them because what I'm doing isn't actually speaking to their language of love. And I think when you look at teams and performance in business, we are social animals. And so the more we can communicate socially, but the more we can recognize and acknowledge the behaviors, which, in a business you'd put into a context of values that are lived, because the more we reward, the things that we reward get repeated. And so the more we can reward, and the more important, that's why it makes it really important to have very clear values for the organization. Because if you have a very clear set of values, whenever you see those values being lived, behaved, demonstrated, that's how you communicate. That's how you contextualize. That's how show the love, so to speak, to increase the probability that, that reward repeating that behavior.
One benefit that people can experience there is when they go into a circumstance like that, you want the other person to feel loved, and you can't help them to feel loved. One thing I found is helpful is just to go to them and say, I want you to feel loved, and I don't know how to do that. And I'm kind of frustrated because I love you a lot and I can't seem to get through. So how can I do that? And just being able to talk with the other person and ask them,
Mm,
how can I do this? Even expressing your own frustration. This is called collaboration. And a lot of people don't know how to just collaborate with someone else because they're so used to other people not taking them seriously,
mm,
or they've just never had that experience. So being able to just go and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'd like. I don't know how to get it across to you, but I'm just telling you straight out. What are your thoughts? So let me ask you, as a lead out here, where are you in your life as you're grappling with this challenging decision that you're facing, and a decision that resonates so much with me and so everybody else in the audience who's either running a business, working themselves into the ground at work, trying to figure out how to spend more time with their kids? Are you going around to the people in your life and are you telling them, hey, I'm having this frustration, I'm feeling trapped between worlds, I want to give some of this up, but I don't even know who I'll be? What do you need from me and how can I serve you? Are you going around having those collaborative conversations with people?
I am, but I wouldn't say I'm doing it with a lot of people. I think there's a lot to be said for, choose where you get your advice from, and choose choose the people that you sound off. And so, for me, I've got groups of people and men in my life where so I go to them and I share the problems, just like, mate, fucking harden up, just put your knuckle down and make it work. And I'm past that, and that to me is the difference between psychological performance and embodied performance, because psychological performance really kind of lends itself to that lone wolf avoidant, because you're using your psychology to override every aspect of feeling felt, and all the underlying guilt, grief, sadness, but you just drive, 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 drive. You've got all the performance hacks under the sun. You're tweaking constantly. You're telling the stories and you're moving. But then all of a sudden, what happens when that stops working? What happens when what's interesting for me is the last stroke that I had, the part of the brain that I had the stroke in is the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional suppression. And so that was interesting. So imagine living a life where you can't throttle your emotions and they just come out.
I love that. That's so true. Have you? Uh, Different dads take different approaches. I'm a pretty big advocate for giving context to people, not necessarily letting them dictate things to your life, but giving them context so they understand. Are you planning to, or have you gone to your son Noah and said and explained your challenge to him and said, "Hey, look, here's the balance I'm playing. Here's what I'm thinking. I want more time with you. Here's my frustration. Here's the challenge," and even just shared the context with him. Have you done that?
I usually have a very open communication with my son, but the depth of this challenge, it presented itself about, maybe 18 months ago when because I had my stroke and then I went into a severe burnout. Um, and it was very strong there. But, one of the things that drove me back into the seat was, again, a lot of guilt, a lot of putting other people first. And I had those conversations with him then. But this time around, no, because this has only really probably been in the last 2, 3 weeks where this has really started to arise again and just go, hey, listen, I don't know if you listened 18 months ago because we're trying to fucking talk to you really, really, really loudly, but I'm not sure if you really, really, really listened. And, so here I'm going to give you a dose of insomnia for a week and a half. I'm going to rattle your cage, and I'm going to get you to start going, okay, something's off here, because I think some of us are so resilient that we can put up with any inner guidance, in order to drive an outcome that may not be for our best or our higher selves, our higher purpose.
Mhm. I hear you. I hear you loud and clear, man. Sounds like you're in the middle of that battle. So many of the dads listening, myself included, are in the middle of that battle right now. So you're leading the charge ahead of us. I look forward to hearing more about this in the future. Thanks for
I
being
don't know
so
about
honest with us, though.
you're welcome. Don't know about leading the charge, but I'm in it. I'm in it, mate. And yeah, if we can contextualize, I don't know if it's a battle as much as it is an initiation. There's a there's a great organization over here. It's called Rites of Passage, and they talk about periods of initiation where you're being initiated into different periods of your life. And they talk about the initiation from you know from early childhood to teens, and then from teens into adulthood, and the importance of what you were referring to earlier with that trust building, but also the community and building of that brotherhood. But people often don't talk about the initiation into midlife. They don't talk about the initiation into later life. Um, and I think, I don't really want to look at it as a battle. I just really feel like I'm being initiated into something right now. And I'm really doing my best to and I'm not always winning at this, surrender to the experience, trust in the experience, because when you don't, it's one thing to conquer a mountain, then you go, oh, okay, I've got another mountain to conquer, but there's the mountain. But imagine if it's just a complete cliff face. I don't know how the fuck I'm going to get up this mountain. I can't even see a line. And then, I think sometimes when we're going through an initiation, I know for me right now, you can't see the line, and you have to just trust. You have to trust that the line will appear, and you'll know exactly, where the next placehold will be for your foot or your hand, and that can be really um, threatening, especially if you're an entrepreneur who's controlling. If you're an entrepreneur who always needs to know what's going to happen next. If you're someone that is really fixated on making the right next step because you don't want to make a mistake.
Maybe for that, I can share with you the words of the great Kerwin Ray, as he talked about when you have frustration, when you're facing frustration, it means that you're on the edge of having a breakthrough.
True that.
Good point. Kerwin, this has been a fantastic talk. Thank you so much. For the people at home who need to hear from you and need to learn more from you, because they do, where can they find you, and how can they work with you if they need to?
Mate, I'm on all the socials, so the Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, kerwinray.com. We run. It's really interesting. Most of my passions really lay in the area of humans. And for the last 25 years, I've been in the area of business. And so, I think, one of the shifts that could be coming is perhaps a shift from business, to people. But right now, our main focus when we help people is really in the space of business. We help business owners succeed. That's really what we do, probably better than anyone. But we do it in a way where it's very holistic. So, you can reach out any which way from there.
I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for joining us. And everybody at home, thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.